This should have worked. Arguably not since the Shield has a wrestling faction debuted with such fervor, excitement, and possibly derangement. The Deathriders began by trying to end Bryan Danielson. Wheeler was conflicted. His fathers were trying to end each other. Bryan Danielson was on a career-threatening AEW championship run, and AEW was trying to recover after the Brawl In and Brawl Out incidents controversies with Glass Bones Phil. It felt like AEW was trying to have a crisis-level event. Yes, it was a lot, but the angle started out with a bang. This shot right here of young men looking destroyed, distraught that their hero is being stretchered out, it was a great start. It's a very cool shot for what turned out to be not a nothing angle, but an angle that, if we're all being honest with ourselves, didn't turn out the way we were hoping. And again, AEW Mark, I love AEW, but I can admit when they've made a mistake. And this whole storyline really fell by the wayside, much in the same way that the Elite EVPs when they jumped Tony Khan, but it never really felt like we had much of a resolution to that story. Didn't really work out. They're on a much better trajectory now, but it didn't work in either situation. But I think it could have, at least the Deathriders. So what didn't work? Well, let's start with the group's manifesto. It was primarily be strong, only the strong survive, which is terrible except for the fact that it ran on repeat. Mox is also arguably too beloved to really be a heel. Like, he's a great face. He's a great come from behind guy. He's also, I just heard what I said there. Mox is also really good at playing the anti-hero, like the Punisher, but being a straight villain, a chicken shit heel, no one buys Mox as that guy. The Miz, sure. MJF, yeah. John, you're not that guy.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
No, I don't believe that the guy who literally bear crawled through glass is a coward. Repeated booking of cheap finishes with interference and a lot of stuff running on repeat just ended it with the dud of a story. Now, there were sparks of brilliance. I think Cope's Revenge was actually really fun. The part where he called Mox kid, wow, that's saying something. But that worked, I thought. Their match of Revolution, however, did not. So, what are the three main things that we need to address in order to fix the Deathriders? Number one, let's keep them only on Dynamite. Now, I'm not saying AEW needs to do a brand split, although they really should. But if you hear Jon Moxley's ramblings too often, it loses credibility. So, keep them strictly on Dynamite. Number two, no cheap finishes. I understand the logic in booking cheap finishes to protect your babyface young guys, but there's so much more mileage in a villain that can actually win on their own without cheating. A bad guy that gets it done. That's the difference between Thanos and Kang. One wiped out half the Avengers, the other one lost to Ant-Man. And number three, a clear message and motivation. Instead of constant ramblings, let's make it very clear. The Deathriders are here to secure AEW's future, by any means necessary. And we'll dive more into the details as the story goes along. Now that said, let's rebook the Deathriders. So let's keep their debut the same. Their attack on Bryan Danielson was solid. Now, going to Wrestle Dream, Jon Moxley makes a few remarks. Mox talks about how much he loves Bryan Danielson. However, this will be the first time he has to leave a brother behind to do the hard thing, to do the right thing. Mox at Wrestle Dream greets Bryan Danielson. However, he does not use the Bulldog Choke. He instead uses a Paradigm Shift. Now, the Bulldog Choke is a very good submission. However, the aspect of wrestlers passing out, the TKO aspect of it, is a little deflating to a live audience. Like, they never tapped out, they passed out. So there's, that does lend some credibility to whoever loses. But that's also a really good way to take the air out of the arena. The Wrestle Dream still ends with Bryan Danielson being stretchered out. However, the ending attack is a little different. Instead of the whole plastic bag thing, Bryan Danielson, his head is wrapped in a chair and it gets stomped on. Not by Moxley, not Claudio, not Pac, but Wheeler Yuta stomps on the chair, hospitalizing Bryan Danielson. Thus, his soul is now corrupt. The following Dynamite, we see Jon Moxley's manifesto and why he's doing what he's doing. He came to AEW to help the revolution, to stand up to the corporate machine and prove that there can be an alternative. However, since 2019, multiple times he's been called upon to stabilize the company and the World Championship, especially when it's bleeding and when it's on life support. But it won't stop bleeding. He's given them so much of his blood, and he did so with love for this company, for this alternative. But the more time that passed, the more he hated what AEW was becoming. An ego-driven company with an uncertain future. filled with weak wrestlers who don't know how good they have it. Mox is here to secure AEW's future by any means necessary. He wants to see who, if anyone, can wrestle the title from him. Who thinks they're man enough to take on Jon Moxley? Baptism by fire, thumbtacks, and barbed wire. Now, going to Full Gear, I'd like to keep the program with Orange Cassidy about the same. I really like that one promo that Cassidy cut, where he mentioned that he's not exactly a rookie. The other young guys, they don't know what they're getting themselves into. But Orange, he's been around the block a few times. And he's fought Jon Moxley a few times too. He knows the war he's walking into. It's at this point that Mox can even tell Orange Cassidy, you're a pretty good wrestler with an outstanding gimmick. You even had a pretty good title run with the International. Hey, who beat you for that title again? That's right. Let's face it, Orange. If you were going to be a main event breakout star, you would have done it by now, but let's see what you can do. John says that Orange Cassidy lacks that killer instinct, the ruthlessness needed to become AEW champion. Oh yeah, and real quick, there's no briefcase in this booking. You see the championship the entire time. That's important. It'll come to play as we go. John carries the AEW World Championship, but as time goes on, we begin to see it aging a bit. It's a little less shiny each week. Maybe some pieces start to break up. Maybe the leather starts to get a little decrepit or torn. Little by little, the AEW Championship is aging, almost like it's dying. Like the soul of the promotion, it's dying. At Full Gear, Jon Moxley defeats a bloodied Orange Cassidy with a paradigm shift. It's a hard-fought match, but afterwards, the Deathriders come out and hold down Orange Cassidy, while Jon takes a chair and wraps it around his leg. Jon says, I take no pleasure in what I'm about to do, but I want you to know that if you come back, you'll come back stronger. But before Orange can be injured, Daniel Garcia, Hook, and Jay Briscoe come out to even the odds with weapons. The Deathriders are ran off, at least for now. I want to keep that spot where Darby rams a truck into the Deathriders vehicle. That was pretty choice. We're going to keep that part. It's also important to note that they still did win the Trios Championships at All In London. Now, at Winter is Coming, Wheeler Yuta does win the TNT Championship. At the same time, at Winter is Coming, Jon Moxley defeats Switchblade Jay White. Come World's End, it's now Jon Moxley versus Daniel Garcia. Daniel Garcia puts up a good fight, but again loses. And Jon Moxley tells him on the mic, kid, maybe you should have signed somewhere a little more safe. Paradigm shift through the announce table. The year ends with the Deathriders on top, holding multiple championships. We then have the story that just passed a few months ago. Mox defends the title against Hobbs at Maximum Carnage, but obviously gets the victory. And it's at this point that Cope returns and declares his intentions to win the AEW World Championship. I do like that dynamic of Cope being maybe the only guy that can say he's more veteran than Mox. Calling him out and saying, I've been through everything you've been through and more than that. I had all this taken away from me. I'm not going to let you take it away from them. Cope, I'm going to just call him Adam Copeland. Adam Copeland has the credibility to say he's gone to war with some of the greatest legends in the industry, and he not only survived, but he beat them. Mox is just the next guy on the list. But that is when Mox can turn the page on Cope. Cope, you weren't on the list, but I'll collect your soul all the same. I thought maybe ending Brian would spark something in these kids, but maybe your sacrifice, maybe that'll do something for them. Mox does win at Grand Slam, but not necessarily convincingly. A rematch is set for Revolution. The opening match, not the main event. The main event should have been Toni Storm and Mariah May. That match was insane. On the way to Revolution, Mox tells Cope he needs to take responsibility for a generation of deathmatch wrestlers. Men and women who put their bodies through absolute hell because of what Cope did. And he speared a legend through a flaming table. How many careers have been impacted? People trying to live up to that moment just to fall short and get injured or worse. Revolution opens with their street fight, both men wearing plain clothes. This is important. They brawl in the crowd, in the back, chairs are bent, ladders are buckled, tables are splintered. The match ends with Mox spearing Cope through a flaming table in the mirror image of WrestleMania 22. With maybe, if they can get him, Mick Foley being the special guest referee for the match and counting the pin. I don't know if Mick is signed to a Legends contract. If he is, damn, but if he's not, I mean, have Mick count the pinfall. That would be nice. Real quick timeout. If you're wondering why everything looks different, it's because this had to be filmed over the course of 3 days for reasons I won't get into. Let's go right back in. We now have Swerve Strickland, who will still be challenging for the championship at Dynasty. Now, can he win back the championship 1 year after he won it for the first time? Well, you see the length of the video. I think we know the answer to that. The build-up is actually quite similar. Bear in mind, I'm filming this about 2 weeks before Dynasty, but I believe they kind of go in the same direction. How Swerve is a dangerous man. He is dangerous. He's everything Moxley calls himself. Now, it's around this time that Swerve begins to use guerrilla tactics to take out members of the Deathriders. Kind of the same way Cope did, but Cope didn't do that. We're going to say Swerve is going to use those tactics because Swerve is that smart. And again, we're trying to set up a point where, oh, maybe it's Swerve that's going to do it. Cope had the credibility. Swerve, he took out all the guys. Maybe him. Swerve takes out everyone except Wheeler Yuta. Swerve tells Wheeler, you're not that guy. This isn't you. Now, I'm going to break my rule just a tiny bit, and I'm going to have Jon Moxley attack Swerve, the Dynamite, right before Dynasty, and just wear out his kneecap with a chair. Just go to town on it. Just destroy his leg. So much so that Swerve actually goes into Dynasty wearing a very heavy, very, very noticeable knee brace outside of his tights. And during the match, Mox rips it off. By the end of the match, Swerve is trying to gut out through the pain. He's fighting, essentially wrestling on one leg. He's on the top rope, getting ready for a Swerve stomp until his leg gives out. Mox is able to run up the ropes to the third rope, catch Swerve, and uses a paradigm shift from the third rope, from the top rope, to put Swerve down. Mox retains, clean. Mox then goes and grabs a chair, goes back into the ring and says on the mic, Swerve, you have my respect. I hope they remember you. And then just destroys Swerve's leg with a chair over and over and over again. Kind of retribution for attacking his friends, but also Mox is beginning to get excessive. Now, it should be said as we're going through this entire story that the AEW Championship is looking less and less shiny, less and less golden, more wear and tear, more tattered. It's not as bad as like the Hardcore Championship, but it should be shown that the AEW title is aging. Almost like the soul of AEW is dying the longer Jon Moxley holds this championship. On the following Dynamite, Mox berates the locker room while in the ring, saying not one of them has been able to step up and challenge him for the championship and take it. No one has been able to survive Jon Moxley. No one, and that's when we hear this music. Darby Allin is back. Darby says he is the one man Mox cannot kill. Darby has been thrown through more tables than he can count. He's literally been hit by a bus and fell 20 feet through broken glass, and through everything else, he kept getting back up. He is the heart of AEW, but that's when Mox says, fine, I won't take your soul, just your heart. Now, admittedly, at Double or Nothing, Darby does lose, but it's not that he loses, it's how he loses. Mox pretty much has the match won. The match is cinched, but Darby Allin keeps kicking out. He will not stay down. At one point, we get a moment kind of similar to WrestleMania 26 with Shawn and Taker, where Moxley is just yelling down at Darby, stay down, just stay down. But Darby refuses, claws up, looks up at Mox, spits in his face. Mox blows up, throwing Darby to the outside, removing the padding, exposing the concrete, and hitting a paradigm shift on the outside, rolling Darby in for an easy 3 count. Darby Allin is stretched to the back, bloody and destroyed. On the following Dynamite, John says, I wasn't planning on caving in Darby Allin's skull, but that did put a smile on my face. And yes, I am stealing quotes from one of the best villains because that's what we need, one of the best villains. On commentary, we hear concern for Darby, particularly from one Taz, because at Double or Nothing, at the same last pay-per-view, Hook qualified for an AEW World Championship opportunity at Fyter Fest. Taz is concerned. Is his son going to be okay? And by this point, the Deathriders, just so we're clear, the Deathriders have already returned. So up to this point, Hook should have been mentored by Samoa Joe and Shibata, having earned his towel. And this is where we begin to see the holes in the relationship. The mirror image of Hook and his mentorship with Samoa Joe versus Wheeler Yuta in his mentorship from Jon Moxley. Joe might be a tough mentor, but he's a coach. He helps Hook. It's tough love. Versus Jon Moxley, who degrades and embarrasses and insults Wheeler Yuta, talking down to him. He's not ruthless enough. He's not dominant enough. Wheeler Yuta needs to get better or else. Even when Wheeler Yuta successfully defends the TNT Championship in a Fatal 4-Way match, Jon Moxley wasn't there, even though he promised he would be. Instead, they were too busy planning, getting ready for... Mox tells him, stop being such a pansy. You won, right? You're welcome. At Fighter Fest, Hook puts up a good fight, but Jon Moxley is by far too much for him. However, before he can continue the beatdown after the bell, Samoa Joe, Shibata, and even Taz jump into the ring to protect Hook. And Jon says, that lion, he doesn't deserve a warrior's death. Then on the ramp, the Deathriders are jumped by Kenny Omega and the Undisputed Kingdom. Now, at Forbidden Door, not gonna lie to you, the Deathriders are gonna have a very, very rough night. Wheeler Yuta is pulling double duty. He loses the TNT Championship to Hook in the opening match. Hook can then revive the TNT Open Challenge every week, thus getting him even more exposure, building him up to being a potential future main eventer, which, let's be frank, he is. A couple matches later, Claudio Castagnoli, Pac, and Wheeler Yuta lose the Trios Championships to the Undisputed Kingdom. Moxley is pissed. Before the main event, Mox berates the Deathriders. How could they lose? What's that going to do? What's that going to do for him? It's at this point a scuffle breaks out. Pac and Claudio say that John says, that's fine, I don't need you. Moxley comes out to the main event of Forbidden Door alone versus Kenny Omega. Hopefully, the two losses early in the night lend credibility to the idea that maybe Moxley will finally lose the championship to Kenny Omega, one of the forefathers of AEW. Spoiler warning, he doesn't. Finally, in the main event, Mox outwardly cheats and takes shortcuts to win and defeat Kenny Omega. After Moxley wins a paradigm shift, he plans to injure Kenny Omega further, targeting his midsection where, the diverticulitis happens. However, Okada runs out and Will Ospreay. They run out for the save and we get two pictures, two main events for AEW All In. On one end, we see Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada. On the other side of the coin, we have Will Ospreay versus Jon Moxley. Now, by this point, the AEW Championship should look tattered, beaten, ruined almost. There's no shine anymore. His championship is on his deathbed. On the following Dynamite, Jon Moxley addresses the Deathriders, saying, I forgive you. I absolve you of your sins. I need you now more than ever. We need to be united now more than ever. Claudio and Pac consider it, and that's when Will Ospreay comes out and says, bro, I can't do that. Will Ospreay says, I might still have double vision. I see you three, and I know you're better than being his lackeys. Now notice, he included Wheeler Yuta in that. He addressed all three men. Will goes on to say, Claudio, you are a powerhouse, a technician, a man who should be a world champion multiple times over. Pac, you're the bastard. You're a high-flying beast. What are you doing serving this guy who doesn't care about you? You don't need him. And as for you, he looks at Wheeler Yuta, you're a good man. And you don't need this. John grabs the mic and says, these are my guys. They know the mission. That's when Pac grabs the mic and says, the mission was to create a better future for AEW. And somewhere along the line, he forgot that. Claudio and Pac leave the Deathriders, leaving only Jon Moxley and Wheeler Yuta. That's fine. We don't need you. Ospreay tells Mox, at All In, you're not getting the Commonwealth Kingpin. You're not getting the King of the Sky. No. At All In, the Aerial Assassin is coming for the throne. On the way to All In, John should defeat Claudio Castagnoli and Pac in one-on-one matches. Wheeler Yuta does help him cheat in those matches, but he looks guilty, disheveled. On the Go Home Dynamite, John talks about the last year of AEW, how John joined AEW and how he's always carried the company on his back through all the hard times. That's when Will Ospreay comes out and says, unexpectedly, thank you. But this should enrage Moxley. Will goes on to say, I don't know if anyone ever gave you your flowers, but if you're looking for gratitude, you have it. You helped establish AEW when this company needed you the most. You always stepped up. Everyone in the back owes you a great thanks. Till now. We are at a crossroads. There's two potential futures here. I win at All In, I take that championship, and there's a brighter future, an opportunity for other young guys going forward. Or you keep that championship and you keep killing the thing that you proclaim to love. The alternative, it dies. Look at that championship, it's lost all its life. It lost its soul, almost like the way you're trying to steal Wheeler Yuta's. Yuta looks conflicted again until we hear this. Bryan Danielson is back. He comes up to the ring and he looks not at Jon Moxley, but at Wheeler Yuta, and he says, I forgive you. And the match is set for All In. The opening match of All In should be Bryan Danielson versus Wheeler Yuta. If Bryan is going to snap Wheeler Yuta out of this corruption, he's going to do it the only way he knows how, by kicking his skull in. In the end, Wheeler Yuta wins with a chokeout, but Bryan tells him it's okay. It's okay. Wheeler Yuta breaks down crying. Later in the night, John goes to Wheeler Yuta, asking him, are you going to come out with me? Yuta says nothing. And so at this point, before the main event, we have two very long tracking shots. One is of Will Ospreay coming out of his locker room, and he passes everyone. Orange Cassidy, Powerhouse Hobbs, Switchblade, Cope, Hook, Darby, Swerve, Daniel Garcia, Kenny Omega, Kazuchika Okada, and lastly, Bryan Danielson and Tony Khan before he goes to the ring. We then see John coming out from the back, coming out of his locker room. But as he walks, there's no one in the halls, no one to look at him, no one to greet him, no one cheering him on. Except right before he gets to the entranceway, all there is Renee. She looks at him, disappointed. She turns around and walks away. And John makes his entrance. This match should be a 30-minute war with Will Ospreay digging deep into his bag of tricks. We also see Mox use moves he rarely, if ever, uses. He uses a Superman punch, a spear, and a stomp. Ospreay uses the house call, a V-trigger, and now Kazuchika Okada neckbreaker special, but nothing is putting either man down. At one point, Will Ospreay goes for an elbow from the top rope through the announce table, but John gets out of the way, and Will Ospreay injures his ribs, but continues to cut through the pain. Now, at around the 20-minute mark, Will Ospreay should be going for another high aerial, high-risk maneuver, but Mox grabs the referee, pulls him in the way, and now Ospreay and the referee are down while Mox goes to the outside to grab the championship belt inside the ring. He looks like he's about to try and nail Will Ospreay with it when Wheeler Yuta comes to the crowd, grabs the championship, and jumps the barricade back out. He didn't interfere directly. He did not attack Moxley, but he pulled the championship. If Mox wants to win this, he has to do it clean. Now, while Mox is looking into the crowd at Wheeler Yuta, we see Will Ospreay getting up over his shoulder on the other side of the ring, yelling, screaming at Mox, "Fight me, you bastard, fight me." We get about 10 more minutes of action with Will Ospreay winning using the Tiger Driver. The same move they used to injure Bryan Danielson and Kyle Fletcher, he uses it to save the soul of AEW. Now, Will Ospreay should celebrate in the ring with most of the babyfaces in the locker room, on their shoulders, him for the next year. That should be a thing. And it's at this point that Bryan Danielson offers him not that old decrepit championship, but a brand new shiny belt. A bright and shining belt for a bright and shining future of AEW. Hopefully building off of all the positive momentum that they've been building for the last 9 months or so. Now, this is the part where the story is almost over. The following Dynamite, Jon Moxley attacks Wheeler Yuta, but no one comes out to help him. Because Wheeler Yuta did still jump a lot of people and injure people. He's not absolved of all his sins. We're not going to forget all the bad things that he did. That said, at All Out, a match is set. It's a lights out match. Wheeler Yuta versus Jon Moxley. Wheeler Yuta should come out clean shaven, revitalized for a match that should save his soul. We have barbed wire, brass knuckles, broken glass, tables, chairs, the whole shebang. But eventually Wheeler Yuta wins using the Psycho Knee. Bryan comes out to try and help Wheeler Yuta, but Wheeler Yuta insists of walking out on his own 2 feet, earning the respect of the fans, hopefully being elevated to another level. However, the final shot of All Out should be Jon Moxley, covered in blood, looking around at the audience, defeated. And it's at this point that Renee comes out, it's close to him, and he begins to cry into her leg, letting out all this emotion, all this frustration, all this damage. Helps Mox stand up, and she helps him to the back. Now, in the aftermath, Will Ospreay is the AEW champion. Wheeler Yuta should have been elevated to possibly a main event status at this point. Other guys like Hook and Orange Cassidy are elevated, as well as Daniel Garcia. Mox has had the opportunity to tell a complex 4D story, the likes of MJF and Hangman Adam Page, which should help him going forward. And when Mox eventually returns down the road after a long vacation, he can come back as a babyface and he could say, "I might have done it in my own way. I will always love AEW, and I'll be the hero that you want, and at times the villain that you need. I will always love AEW." And there you go. That is the Deathrider storyline redone, hopefully done better, because again, their motives aren't quite clear. It's kind of a cold reset button, if we're being honest here. Could have been better. That said, what did you think of the story? How terrible is it? Let us know down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you have any suggestions, I want to do more of these rebooking videos. Trying to make them a thing. I'm going to do my best. Lord knows I'm not the first guy to attempt this, and I'm not the best one at it. That said, yeah, we'll catch y'all next time. See you, everybody.